What's up, friends? Welcome to Web3 Academy, a place for entrepreneurs, creators, and marketers to explore and learn how to use Web3 to transform business models and create thriving communities. Enjoy this next episode. GM, welcome, friends, to another episode of Web3 Academy on the podcast. Today, we are talking about blockchain trade-offs, why rollups hit the sweet spot for scale and security. We try to talk about blockchains as much as possible because this is the underlying real estate that everything is going to be on, that you're going to build on, that you're going to hold your assets on, that you're going to have your identity on. And it's really important that we know where we are keeping our assets, right? And that's why we want to make sure that we are explaining to you where's the most secure places, but also where is this heading in the future so that you can, not start working on what's working right now, but on where the future of this tech is going. Okay. Now, before I get into that, because I'm going to read an article that a community member from Web3 Academy wrote, DinoEggs.eth. Highly recommend you follow him on Twitter. He is a part of Polygon DAO and is tweeting out a bunch of cool and interesting stuff on rollups and just sort of the future of where blockchain is heading. But before we get into the details of this article, there's just a few things I want to address. One, if you have not yet taken our rabbit hole course, I highly recommend you do. There's actually, in the second module of this course, we're going to dive super deep into blockchain and rollups, and actually into a lot of what we're going to talk about here in this episode. But then there's also the application layer, which is what's being built on top of these and how that's going to look. And then just understanding the sort of truths of Web3, the ethos behind it, and where that whole space is going. That's what the Web3 Rabbit Hole course is all about. It's free. You just go in, you sign up, and there's a course, and you get to mint an NFT at the end to prove that you have completed the course. And this will come in handy when you are looking to get a job, and potentially for other things that happen inside the Web3 Academy community, as well as potentially other things throughout the larger ecosystem. So highly recommend you go and you complete that course if you have not yet. The link to the course is in the show notes below. And finally, as I mentioned, follow DinoEggs.eth on Twitter. Give me a follow as well, Kyle Reidhead, KYLEREIDHEAD. I tweet a lot about Web3, mainly in how you can use Web3 to transform business models and transform communities. So do follow me on Twitter. And while you're there, follow Web3 Academy as well. It's Web3 Academy with a dash underneath or an underscore. Again, all of those links are in the show notes below. Okay, without further ado, let's get started on blockchain trade-offs, why rollups hit the sweet spot for scale and security. So layer twos, side chains, and rollups. It's all so new and confusing. Realistically, they've only arrived on everyone's radar in the last few years. But ultimately, L2s, side chains, and rollups are the technologies that can scale a blockchain without compromising security, right? Which is why it's so important. This is the key: is we don't want scalable blockchains if they are not secure and decentralized. Okay, we've gone through many iterations of L1s that have came and gone and didn't make it because they were not secure. There's no point in a blockchain that is scalable that is not secure. You might as well just use a centralized database. It defeats the purpose of this whole space. So the blockchain trilemma of accomplishing decentralization, security, and scalability seems to be unsolvable at the moment. But the only visible solution to this right now is rollups and layer twos. In the grand scheme of things, decentralization and security is important when dealing with large, valuable assets, and scale doesn't matter so much when you're moving millions and billions of dollars. But when you're building applications for the masses, we need scalability as well. So let's dive into the current adoption of scalable solutions and the different alternatives that are available to us right now. Now, I understand that this is a very confusing topic, and that's actually why we wanted Dino to write this article for us. So let's cut out some of the noise. Web3 is full of jargon. So let's first set the stage and offer an easy way to think about the space. If you've scrolled through crypto Twitter, you've likely heard people mention layer ones like Bitcoin or Ethereum, layer twos like Optimism and Arbitrum and different versions of Polygon, like Polygon Hermes. And if you've listened a little more closely, you've likely heard people mention side chains like Polygon, POS, or again, rollups like Optimism and Starknet, which are just another type of layer 2. If you're further down the rabbit hole, you likely know that there are many other flavors as well. However, for this article and this podcast episode, we are going to ignore all of that. Instead, we are going to simply think about each solution as just a blockchain. And actually, this is how I typically refer to it as well, as everything is just a blockchain. And whether or not L2s and rollups are technically blockchains is an esoteric topic and up for debate, but it's useful to think about them this way just to understand things and simplify a little bit. I am not a tech person and developer. Many of you listening are not as well. So let's try to make this as easy on us as possible. So evaluating blockchains. Now that we have a bunch of blockchains, which ones are the best? Well, each blockchain can be evaluated based on different properties. And here are the major ones. There's performance, right? Which you can think of as speed. There's cost, right? Your gas fees. There's security, and then there's decentralization. Now let's unpack them through a non-technical end user lens. So performance refers to both bandwidth and throughput. So basically what that means is how many transactions the blockchain can process at once and the speed at which they are being processed. So this is analogous to how many lanes a highway has. You can think of that as bandwidth, and what the speed limit is, and that's throughput. So as far as an end user is concerned, performance is how fast the application runs, whether the application is sending someone money, trading one asset for another, or posting a tweet on the Web3 version of Twitter, right? Cost is pretty straightforward. I think we all understand that. It's how much the end user must pay in blockchain fees to use the application or to use the blockchain. Performance and cost are sexy to talk about, and they are the things that make all the headlines. We often forget about decentralization and security. Unless you are an OG in this space, then this is really probably all you care about. The headlines we typically see are new supersonic L1 or layer 1 raises $1 billion with 1 billion TPS transactions per second is what that means, in 0 fees. This is what we heard all through 2021 with the likes of Solana and Avalanche and all of these different ETH killers, as we call them. In turn, many people entering the Web3 space place a disproportionately large value on these two properties. Sometimes people only consider one of the two, right? Simply looking at one blockchain as cheap and another as expensive. In fairness, this is how most of us are accustomed to evaluating technology products. But with blockchain, there is a lot more to it. When we're securing assets, right? The security and the decentralization matters. The other two properties, security and decentralization, are, and security can be confusing since people use it to mean all different things. And you commonly see blockchain experts talk right past each other when discussing it. This Twitter thread, which is being shown on screen, and you can link to if you're in the article, but Polynaya does a good job breaking security down into 3 components. 2 are quite hard to build. So let's look at this. Economic security. In proof-of-stake blockchains, if a user owns the majority of staked coins, they get meaningful control over the network. Since the system relies on coins accruing value, the more expensive the coins, the harder it is to buy the majority of them, of course. It is important for blockchains to have a sound monetary policy and build up their currency's credibility over time. So that's economic security, okay? Then we have protocol security or protocol stability. So protocols are implemented in software, and software carries the risk of bugs, right? In software development, there are best practices to minimize bugs, such as keeping the software simple, so fewer lines of code means less room for error, and keeping upgrade processes conservative, so more time for testing. Examples in a blockchain context include protocols deciding not to add functionality for on-chain governance and taking longer to upgrade as the total value locked grows. What comes to mind here is the Ethereum merge. This has taken a very long time. We've all been very patient here, but the reason is because we need it to be secure, and we have a lot of value on the Ethereum blockchain. So that's security. Let's talk decentralization, which is hotly debated, and like security, can mean a lot of things. But Balahaji, I think is how you pronounce his name, wrote a comprehensive article on this topic, breaking down blockchains into subsystems, okay? However, he does acknowledge that some of these decentralized subsystems may be more essential than others. And for simplicity, we will just focus on nodes and ownership. For example, Paulinaya also wrote an article highlighting these two critical aspects. By the way, if you want to learn about rollups, follow Paulinaya. It's Polynya. He does a lot of great tweets to help you understand rollups. It's really, really good. But let's dive into some of these critical aspects here, these subsystems. So we have node decentralization, which means how easy is it for the average person to run the blockchain software? So to become a network node and verify transactions, right? And how many people are actually doing it? If you run a node, no one can change the protocol rules on you because your computer will reject invalid transactions. If the software can run in the background on a laptop or a phone, more people will run it, right? It could even become something that's integrated into a device like a phone. If the software requires an expensive server in the cloud, fewer people will run it, right? So this is one of the big differences between things like Solana and Ethereum. Ethereum is very easy to run a node. You can just use a laptop. Solana, you have to have a bigger, a bigger sort of like database and machine to be able to do this. So now let's look at a few examples. Now that we know the evaluation criteria, we can look at some of these examples. So Solana is great at performance and cost. Ethereum, great at security and decentralization. And then we have Starknet, which is great at performance, cost, security, and decentralization. Okay, let's see. We'll dive into what that is. By the way, as we get into this, I know it's going to get a little bit more complicated. So if you want to discuss this topic further and maybe highlight other alternatives or ask questions on things that we're talking about here, join our Discord community and ask away, share your thoughts, whatever you want. The link to our Discord community is in the show notes below. There's plenty of entrepreneurs, business professionals, marketers, creators in there, all helping each other understand and go down the Web3 rabbit hole. So Solana has developed a strong brand around speed, right? And it lives up to the hype. When using Solana, you feel like you're using a typical Web2 application. You still must pay transaction fees, of course, but they are negligible. The downside is this is accomplished by requiring very powerful and expensive computers, as I mentioned, to run nodes. So this causes poor decentralization over time and unsustainable token economics to subsidize the cost of running these nodes, right? Which as a result causes poor security over time. So Solana also still has suboptimal token distribution and protocol stability as a 2-year-old project. What that means is Solana is new. There was a lot of investment from VCs in Solana in the beginning, so they got a lot of the tokens, a large share of it. I don't know the exact numbers in my head right now, but it's more than 50%. And so basically, what happens is over time, those VCs can start to sell those tokens, and then it gets more distributed to kind of the masses and to the users. And so over time, that may become more optimal, the token distribution, but right now, it's not so great. So Ethereum makes the opposite trade-offs of Solana for the most part. It is by far the most secure programmable blockchain, both in its current proof of work form and soon as it moves over to proof of stake. There is currently $23 billion staked of Ether, its sound monetary asset, and the protocol has proven stable over the past 6 years. Ethereum also maintains low hardware requirements to run nodes and a culture that promotes this behavior. The downside is that scarce, desirable block space causes congestion and thus high transaction fees, dramatically limiting the types of applications and users that can leverage the network, right? Many of us got pushed out of the Ethereum network during 2021 because gas fees were just so high. So for the past few years, Ethereum has worked well for high value, low throughput use cases like financial services, but horribly for low value, high throughput use cases like social media, gaming, and things like that. Are both sets of trade-offs viable? It's unlikely. Chains that neglect security and decentralization will be unsustainable over the medium to long term, a view backed by basic economics and predictable hardware projections. And this enters rollups. Starknet and other rollups, aka let's just think of them as blockchains, solve this problem and unlock the best of both worlds, right? The way they do this is by focusing on performance and cost while using fancy cryptography to inherit security and decentralization from another blockchain. We won't get into how rollups technically work, but rather we'll hammer home the benefits. If you are using applications built on Starknet, you are benefiting from the security and decentralization of Ethereum behind the scenes. As an example, even if the Starknet operators are corrupt, it is mathematically impossible for them to steal your funds unless they also corrupt the Ethereum network. But we know that that is very, very, very difficult to do. Because of the cryptographic assurances, rollups can focus their energy on optimizing performance and costs to support high value and low value applications alike. As a relatable example, developers can fork Solana and tweak it to be an Ethereum rollup if they wanted to. Better yet, a bunch of developers can deploy a bunch of Solanas all running in parallel and inheriting Ethereum security and decentralization. Circling back to Starknet now, developers can also design rollups from the ground up to be faster and cheaper than Solana, which is of course what many are doing now. The design space here is wide open. So it's likely you're now thinking to yourself, like, that sounds great, but what's the catch? You know, Solana pops up everywhere, and this is my first time hearing about Starknet, maybe. Why would people choose inferior solutions? Well, the reality is it's early days for most rollups, and it's only becoming vogue to build them over the past couple of years, right? These are all very, very new. We just said Solana is only a couple of years old. Before that, VCs were more inclined to fund, Ethereum killers than solutions actually building on top of Ethereum. Even Polygon, which has committed $1 billion to rollup development, had to somewhat embrace the competing L1 narrative to get off the ground. Even more important to point out is that the magic behind rollups is based on state-of-the-art cryptography. It's really hard mood math and takes longer to deploy than simply copying the code of existing blockchains. Despite the above challenges, some rollups are live with training wheels on, which basically means that they have some centralized components to it, just so the devs can keep things going and make sure it doesn't break. And there's plenty coming around the corner as well. So let's talk about an early signal here. Developers and users can't be expected to sit still. So naturally, applications and supporting infrastructure, so wallets and fiat on-ramps, et cetera, are built around available solutions. Fortunately, some rollups are compatible with existing blockchains already, making it easy for developers to port their applications. In the same way it is trivial to move from Ethereum to something like Avalanche, it will be trivial to move from Avalanche to EVM rollups as they mature. So do any rollups have traction today? Well, yes, quite a few actually. And for example, DYDX, which is I believe it's a derivatives trading platform, and options, it has $1 billion of TVL in its decentralized exchange rollup already. Immutable X, I think it's now called Immutable. They've recently changed their name, is an NFT specific rollup and is working with some impressive names like MasterCard and GameStop. And it's building an NFT marketplace and plenty more over there on Immutable. It has, I think, one of the highest transactions of NFTs of any blockchain right now. Starknet recently launched their alpha product on Ethereum mainnet, which already shows impressive adoption. And we have a picture up here, which just shows in the last, 60 days, maybe even 30 days, we basically went from zero all the way up to $620,000 of TVL it's in 7 days. So it's happening very rapidly. So if the early activity is any indication, the future looks bright for rollups. So why does this matter? Well, the need for strong security and decentralization is intuitive when dealing with valuable assets, but less so when playing games or scrolling through social media feeds. When you recognize the connection to application sustainability over the medium long term, it starts to make more sense. If you knew that social media platform A would be going out of business in 2 to 3 years, and social media platform B would last decades, you would likely start posting and building your reputation on social media platform B, right? So I just want to give a quick summary here before we wrap this article up. Basically, what we're saying here is that we have this trilemma, right? And it's impossible right now anyway to build a single blockchain that is secure, decentralized, cheap, and fast. And so these rollups, like we've been speaking about through this episode, so Starknet, Immutable, the ones that weren't mentioned here is Optimism, Optimism, Arbitrum, are basically blockchains that just plug into a layer 1 blockchain. And all of these ones plug into Ethereum. And so Ethereum can focus on security and decentralization. It doesn't need to focus on speed and cost, okay? So the Ethereum L1 is going to remain expensive, is going to remain slow, but at the same time, it's going to remain secure and decentralized, and that's what we need. But because we have that layer, that settlement layer, all of these other blockchains don't need to worry about security and decentralization. They can build a blockchain that focuses on speed and cheapness and just plug into the Ethereum L1 and use that for security and decentralization to settle their transactions instead. Okay. And so that is really the idea in the future of blockchains. Now, down the road, we probably won't really know what blockchains we're using as a user, because that will just be within the app. It'll just kind of manage it all for us. But as a developer or a builder, you will want to know, and you will want to build in the right places. And that's basically what Dino's getting across here is, look, a lot of these other layer ones that aren't maximizing for decentralization and security, they're not going to be here in the future unless they can figure that out. But right now, no one has. And so if you are building, if you are holding assets, if you are creating assets, you want to do it on something that's going to be around for decades and decades to come. And right now, all the research, best research in this space is showing that's going to happen on rollups like Starknet. Okay. Now the technology is still new, and it's developing and growing. There still has its pains, but it's coming, and it's coming really fast. Okay. So hopefully this article and this episode helps guide your thinking, whether you're looking to build or use blockchain applications now or into the future. I just want to say a quick thank you to Dino. Again, it's DinoEggs.eth for writing this article for Web3 Academy. He has been writing about Web3 infrastructure for a while now. He's been in our community for a while. And you know, we talk about rollups a lot on the podcast, and just really wanted to get a deep dive into understanding what this stuff is. So do follow him on Twitter, and make sure he's got I believe it's a Medium newsletter. You can check that out as well. It'll be in the show notes below. And yeah, enjoy his writing and continue to learn and understand where this technology is going, because I think it's going to be very important for us in the future. Again, if you have any questions, please feel free to join our Discord, and we will have tons of conversations in that around blockchains, rollups, and all that kind of stuff there. And finally, if you are also a writer and you have something cool you want to write about, and it doesn't have to be about blockchains, maybe it can be about an application or an NFT or marketing or growth or whatever. If you think that it will help the community of Web3 Academy, then we would love to share your article just like we did here with Dino. Okay. So if you're interested in publishing, either message one of the team members inside the Discord or DM us on Twitter. And we'd be happy to help you with your article. We'd love to share it in our newsletter. And by the way, if you are not subscribed to our newsletter, it's about time you do. Show notes below, you will see subscribe to the newsletter. Just click there, toss your email, and you'll get an article, 3 of them every single week, along with these podcasts. Thank you, friends, for listening today. I really appreciate you listening to this podcast, and I hope that you all learned something today, and hope that you have a wonderful day or night or evening, whatever it is, wherever you are. Thank you, friends. I'm Kyle, and all the best. Thank you for listening to Web3 Academy. We hope this helps you along your Web3 journey. And if it does, please share this episode and subscribe so you don't miss the next one. By the way, if you've yet to join the Discord community, you are missing out. This is where all the magic happens. This is where we learn, where we ask questions, where we network. You want to be in there. The link to join is in the description below. And finally, a quick disclaimer. Nothing in this podcast was financial advice. Crypto and Web3 can be risky. You can literally lose it all. In fact, if you invest on account of what we say, you probably will lose it all. So don't do that. In all honesty, the point of this podcast is to remove the noise of markets and price and focus on utility and implementation anyway. So you should not take any of this as financial advice. Thank you, friends, and see you in the next one.